Good morning, everybody. You made it to Thursday, but you're not yet at Friday, so it's just almost the end of the week. Bulelo's here, and Pumi's here, and I am here, and you are here, along with the rest of the team running things in the background. We've got Sipiwe and Homolemo, and we've got everything else that makes it all happen. So, good morning and welcome this Thursday. Dun, 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 dun. We've got the burning platform a little bit later on today, which is always everybody's favorite part of the week. And this morning we have a return champion, Kanthan Pillay, joining Pumi and I for the burning platform. It's going to be lots of fun. So stick around for that. What's happening, Pums?
Hello, boys.
You're back at home?
Hence no glasses.
That's hilarious.
I am. I'm so looking forward to hearing Bulelo tell us about the Olympics.
We've got a lot to talk about. The Olympics, obviously, it's about coming together. It's about nations all competing in a friendly way against each other. Humans pushing the boundaries of what physical capabilities we have, and controversy for no good reason. There's plenty of that, as usual.
I do want to quickly tell you this. On my way to work yesterday, on one of the radio stations, there was somebody talking about the wildest thing I've ever heard on the Olympics. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get to the office and Google this, because you can't just let radio DJs tell you stuff and believe it. What an insane thing happened at the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis in America. First of all, a one-legged, wooden-legged.
I'm old, but I'm not that old. 1904. What happened in 1904?
A wooden-legged gymnast won 3 gold medals. It's like, what? What? In total, he won 7 medals, I think. It's the most insane thing. Like the marathon, the marathon was the pièce de résistance of that entire thing, which had the guy that won it actually hadn't won it. He'd hitched a ride halfway through the marathon, and then hitched a ride because he was dehydrated, and the car he was hitching a ride in broke down. So he ran the last 2 miles and was the first person to cross the line. And so as he was about to get the medal, the second guy arrived, and he was just like, what the hell? Somebody passed out. They would from dust, kicking up dust, and halfway through passed out because there was too much dust in his esophagus, which then ruptured and his stomach. I was just like, what the hell was actually going on there?
So in other words, if there was ever an Olympics that needed to be controversial, it was those ones in 1904.
There were 2 Black South Africans that participated. One came 7th and one came 12th, and they ran the whole thing barefoot. There were only 2 water stations. This thing is insane. It will blow your mind. You must Google it. Google it, guys.
That sounds amazing. It sounds absolutely incredible. 1904.
I actually shared the Wikipedia link on my Twitter yesterday because I was just blown away.
Well, I mean, we think of early Olympic Games and we think of controversies and we think of Jesse Owens, right? And we think of what happened there with I think it was the 1936 Olympics that they had in Germany with Hitler. Hitler hosted the Olympics, and he was very unhappy that there was a black man.
He refused to give the medal over to the winners. I mean, there were this marathon. There were apparently 7 competitors, runners from Greece who never run a marathon in their lives. Never run a marathon. Just there was the Cuban runner had raised money in Cuba to come to the Olympics by running mini marathons. And then when he arrived in America, I think he landed in Now I forgot. But when he arrived, all the money he had raised that he had left over from the trip, he lost in a gambling, like in a dice game on the first day
Oh
when
my
he
God.
arrived.
Oh my God! He said that if you're ever going to enter the Olympics as an ordinary person, those would have been the days, right? Because you could have got
Yeah.
away with it. There was no
Yeah.
such thing as professional athletes. When did that start, Mbulelo? Professional athlete, probably in the 1950s and 60s. Because
Well,
these people
Yeah,
were carpenters, they were doctors, they were plumbers, they were municipal workers. They didn't. That was their real job. They did various athletic events as part of the fun. It was their hobby.
yeah, I mean, it's sort of the one that's in our consciousness is association football or soccer for some people. Was really the British keep telling people they invented football. It's nowhere near true. What they
Yeah.
invented was association football, and they were the first people to make the rules, and they were the first to pay players. So as we know it today, that's probably the like the beginning of the juggernaut. Sort of club football is being paid. Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
probably looking at like the late 40s, 50s, yeah, for sure.
I mean, when Muhammad Ali was in the Olympics, he was also an amateur boxer.
Yeah, so yeah, you're not allowed to pay Olympic athletes, by the way. So at the Olympics, they don't get any prize money to this day, by the way. That's
Really?
just, I don't know if you know that. So it's a big, yeah, the Olympics are,
Good.
you
Hey,
know, I love sport,
one of
bit of a
those-
scam there.
I'm one of those people who thinks that you shouldn't be paid for any sport. I mean,
At all?
no, not at all. I don't think that.
What about acting? Should we pay actors?
No, I also don't think actors should be paid.
Oh, okay. So as long as you're consistent, as long as Mariah Carey shouldn't get paid either, then I'm with you.
No, definitely not. Entertainers and athletes, no payment. There shouldn't be any of that. But that's a wild story for me. You see, there are still radio DJs who do a bit of research and do their shows. That's good.
But I have to tell you why I Googled it, because I was in a conference, in a digital conference a couple of months ago, and one of the speakers so confidently made a claim that carrots are orange because they come from the Netherlands, and it was a conscious decision that they should be orange. And it's so confident, you know, it was like it was a branding, wara, 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 wara. And I thought to myself, this can't be right. This guy can't be this. It's
No.
a global conference. I was like, this can't be right. So I went and I Googled. So now, like the idea of Googling to catch people out from their like shit, I was just like, this guy. I put it in the conference notes to say, I'm sorry, but you've got this guy was sus. Like, really? Carrots are
good.
orange because they come from the Netherlands?
Some people bullshit their way through. But I mean, this is wild because what you discovered is almost more unbelievable than that, and yet it's a big, you know, it's like a big story that happened all those years ago in the Olympics. Listen, I do enjoy the Olympics. I said so. We've got one South African who's doing really well at the moment. This Tatiana Schoenmaker, and she continues to impress. You know my feelings. The very hardcore, very shit, very rational part of me says, "Well, silver medal. That's just first loser." You know, but the gold, that's the one that we want. And
so she's in the mix again, by the way. She's broken another Olympic record for the 200 breaststroke, and she's probably going to win that, because the 100's a little trickier to win. Is if you mess up probably 4 or 5 sort of of your strokes, you're out. In the 200, that separates the real animals, because that's 4 laps. And yeah, another Olympic record. So she's she's Penny Haynes reincarnate.
Well, she's terrific. Good for her. We need some stories of winning, because I was also watching this whole controversy unfold about Simone Biles, and people were making a huge amount of noise on both sides. So she's this incredible young athlete who's just done an immense amount of winning in gymnastics, right? And she could do things with her body that it just shouldn't be humanly possible. And the rest of us feel like we're made of lead when we watch her. But she had a bit of a meltdown, she says, due to mental health, and she she's decided that she doesn't want to take the bad with the good. She doesn't like all this pressure at the Olympics, and she's decided to take a break for her mental health. But she basically just walked out on her team. And there are people who are very, very angry with her on one side. There are people on the other side who think she's the bravest person ever just because she's taking her mental health so seriously. It's amazing, though, that we've reached a point in human endeavor where you can be a winner both for winning the gold at the Olympics, which seems obvious to all of us, but you can also be a winner in some people's eyes by being a quitter and by falling out, by kind of dropping out. It never used to be that those people would be considered winners, but that's how things have changed now. And there's almost some kind of a premium on people who will find some way, and I don't disbelieve that she's having some sort of mental crisis, and if she is, then she's probably done the right thing for herself by dropping out. Who the hell am I to tell? But this is now regarded as something brave. I mean, it's ironic to me that the very people who think that she's brave for dropping out for, her mental health and doing this are the people who don't consider it an achievement to get gold. And the people who consider it an achievement to get gold are not the people who consider it a victory to step aside and take your mental health and put it first. It's like there are two different subspecies of humans living on Earth right now. We see the world in completely different ways. I don't know how to make sense of this.
Well, what about this? So that's going, whatever. She's going through whatever's going on there. I'm more on the side of you get $20 million a year. Like, I don't need to hear about the human part, but
get on the rings. Yeah.
We do live in a society where people need to constantly tell us that they're fathers and mothers and how hard it is. It's like, no one told us that 100 years ago. Like, they just got on with raising their kids. Like, now, how often do you hear just from the common citizenry that being a mom's a full-time job? Like, okay, that's always been a thing. Like, thanks. Why are you telling us? So this is the logical conclusion, right? Where everyone's a thing now. Like, just keeping your human alive is you deserve a gold medal. So why wouldn't Simone Biles head this way? Which is a very confusing time to live in.
You
I
get
don't
more
think
credit.
it's the same thing, though. I don't think it's the same thing, though. It's not just dropping out for dropping out. I think the thing that a lot of people are recognizing is when the stakes are so high, to say, I'm actually not going to break myself for this one thing. I'd rather be okay to fight another day is what people are looking at and recognizing. So to be able to walk away, Mbulelo, from a 20 million rand check, to say, listen, right now, that check is not where we come from, a time when people would break themselves just so that people around them don't think that they are weak, and not because they are not weak. So I think that they're two different things. It's not just, dropping out and being like a druggie on the side of the road. It's not that kind of dropping out. It's at the peak where everybody is looking at you and everybody is clapping. It's actually almost ununderstandable for a lot of people to say people are okay with walking away from all that, like, adoration, because for whatever reason they're struggling right now. That's what I think is the hard thing.
Well, there are lots of comments from people here. The Eleutheria says, if she'd done it during the individual events, different story, but she abandoned her team during the team event, and that is just selfish. Well, you see, this is the kind of a very polarized opinion that people have now of her. I agree with Ben Shapiro. She's neither a villain nor a hero for dropping out. She's just human. You should always try to dazzle with brilliance. If not possible, then baffle with bullshit. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just that's your whole purpose. Like, if you've built up to this, you're at the Olympics. It's been a pretty weird Olympic Games. We don't have the crowds that we've had before. This should be her chance to shine. She was tapped to be the number one medal winner at these Olympics, right? Do you think
my difficult
Pressure's just too much. I mean, I'm trying to be understanding and sympathetic here. At the same time, I think, like with Naomi Osaka,
She's
there's
unbearable. She's unbearable. Naomi Osaka's unbearable.
Yes, absolutely. But there's a premium attached to people who consider themselves to be in some way victimized or beleaguered or unfairly treated by society. And that counts more than being a winner. Somehow, in some people's minds, the more you struggle and the more difficult you think your life is, because I really don't believe that either of these two women who I've just mentioned now have the hardest lives on earth. They just don't. There is no way you can compare them to just about anything else on earth that people do for a living and say that they're having a tough time by comparison. You just can't. And don't say, oh, well, the Olympics, it's very tough, it's very hard, it's mentally exhausting, the competition is so high. That's what they've trained for their whole lives. That's what they do. That's their whole job. That's like
and
me
they get paid exorbitantly by social standards. So there must be a price. That's why we pay you. You have to tolerate the extra stress.
Imagine the CEO.
But is it not sufficient then for you that at 24, which is I think she's 24, right, Mulelo?
Yeah,
right.
Which is quite old for a gymnast, actually.
She has already endured physical and sexual abuse. She has put herself.
I'm in a sad.
Also, no, that's fine. Yeah. It's fine that you don't care. But my question is, she's endured all of these things and has gotten a place where she's going, okay, breaking. And rather than break, I'm going to walk away.
Why not do that at the start of the Olympics or do it once you've done the Olympics? To do it in the middle seems to me, and she pitched up afterwards and she was smiling and carrying on as if nothing was wrong. So I don't know that there was such a huge amount of duress suddenly on her. There was suddenly such pressure on her. I'm tired of people with their backstories about abuse and how hard their lives are. I know it sounds extremely callous, but everybody on earth has some kind of cross to bear. And I'm sick of hearing these stories. I've lost the ability to empathize with those people completely. When they start down there, oh, I had a horrible time when I was little. I was deprived.
I think it's like a car. I think it's very much like a car. When you drive your car and you start driving your car at the beginning of a journey, you may feel that there's something wrong with it. Maybe it's making a little sound that I'm not sure about, but you're like, okay, maybe it'll get to where I want it to get to. And if a quarter of the way there, the car breaks down, the car breaks down. So she may have started already with an inkling that says, oh, I'm not sure if I can pull this thing all the way through, but I'm going to do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
And then it breaks down.
As you said, back in 1914, some dude with a wooden leg was winning gold medals because he was running and jumping and fighting and fucking doing whatever he was doing. Listen, I hear you, but here's my big concern is that now mental health is this coverall, impenetrable excuse that people will use. And it's never been an excuse that was valid before because you would have to be certified as a lunatic. You'd have to be in an asylum to have got away with that excuse before. Now, thanks to people like Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and Oprah Winfrey, what's happened is that the whole world has now decided, oh, hang on a second. If we can use mental health as an excuse, no one can question us. This is a great excuse. You're going to see people doing
it. Is it a reason?
I think it's an excuse. I think everybody's got some mental health fragilities. Everybody's got some. This is going to become, because you dare not question it, right? You dare not say to someone, I don't think you have mental health issues. I just think you're full of yourself. I think you're self-absorbed. You can't say that to someone. That's like the most callous thing you can ever say. And who's going to prove it? What are you going to do? Force them to go for a test? If someone says they've got COVID, you can test them. You can see if they've got COVID. Oh, okay, that's why you weren't at work. You had COVID. Fine. If you have a mental health breakdown, I know this is going to be very unpopular with some people. You have a mental health breakdown, it's all in your head. There's no way that you can demonstrably show that that's happened. You may very well have had a mental health breakdown, but you might also be making it up. It might be a really convenient excuse. There might be people all over the world who have always looked for an excuse. And now this is the one that is unassailable. Because if I say that I've had a mental health breakdown, who are you to tell me I haven't? You know what I mean?
Precisely. And if you do feel that for whatever reason, I mean, I think about, we were talking about 1904. We come from a time where just having an orgasm was considered hysteria for women, right?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
why can we not advance to a place that says, right, if a person's mind is unable to continue functioning in the way that we need it to function, and that person removes themselves from the situation, that's
Fair enough.
we should be able to say, all right, this person has removed themselves from the situation because they feel that their mind is unable to continue delivering in the way that there is an expectation for them to deliver on. That, I think that we should applaud, because what you actually really don't want is, you don't want a crazy person, or you don't want a broken person as part of the team, because then that is detrimental to the team.
Well, yeah.
So
I mean,
I just fear here that there's something else going on. Is that there's a conflation, right? Because as soon as you say something about Simone Biles, is you don't believe in mental health. No. They are existentially apart. You can still say mental health if she's going through that. That's awful. But when you're in a team environment, and you know, as a junior, I played these team sports. There are constantly people pushing themselves over the edge, and you cry in the locker room. That's actually the rule at that level. Or there's always somebody going through it. That's what the locker room's for. It's why it's such a sacrosanct place. And if you ask most athletes, that's the only place they really feel safe. It's when they're doing what they do, or the locker room. Is Simone Biles, you may be going,
and when you can no longer keep it in the locker room, and you fear it may spill over onto the playing field, is it then not the right thing to do to remove yourself from the playing field?
But most people would do what you're saying now. The you know, the $20 million you earn per year, that's to push yourself. When things get this tough, that's when you earn that money. It's not when things are comfortable and you're winning gold medals.
No, it's not when it gets this tough. So she has gone through this tough, and she is going, this is further than any tough I've ever had to go, and I cannot do it. And rather than let that impact on the rest of the team, I am going to walk away and allow them to get to the best that they can do and the tough that they want to get to.
The way you explain it, Pumi, it makes perfect sense, and I can't argue with it. It's a very sensible way to behave. And I think that if that was what I believed, and I don't believe her, I don't believe that that's what she's doing at all. I just don't believe her. And there's so many people who do this mental health thing that I just don't believe. Like, you didn't believe that person who said carrots are orange because they come from the Netherlands. You know, I just think a lot of these, I don't believe you. I'm going to be saying this to people more and more often now, is because even if everything that you said is true, then I don't have an argument. I really don't. And I can't say anything about this. None of my business. I mean, even Tracy says, why are we even discussing this? It's a non-issue. It's done. She made up her mind. We will never know what really happened and what led her to this. Everything said is pure speculation. Cool. Allow me to be speculative about her honesty, like I am speculative about Naomi Osaka's honesty, or I'm speculative about Joe Biden's honesty, or I'm speculative about Boris Johnson or Angela Merkel's honesty, or Cyril Ramaphosa's. I don't think all of these people are honest players. I really don't. I think that sport is now becoming infected with a level of dishonesty. I'm not saying in this case it's her, right? But it's become a thing. It's part attention seeking, and it's part generalized, unassailable excuse that people will use. Now it's going to be mental health. Before it was identity. There's going to be a whole lot of other stuff that dishonest people will use. Now, I'm not saying that she's dishonest in this case, but I don't necessarily believe all of these people who tell me that they've got mental health problems. I don't think all of them do. I think being human is hard. I think being human is tough. You've got a lot to deal with. But all this navel gazing, all this, I think I might have a mental health problem and it makes me interesting. That stuff, I think there's a huge amount of that happening. Huge amount. Because it's become fashionable to do that.
And there's a brutality here, right? Is sportsmen and sportswomen, and we're starting to see it now more and more, is you're not actually human, you're just a product. Because that's actually the problem. Most of the problem is that you get paid. And that's brutal for sportsmen to hear. Trust me, I know them. And more of them were people. And no, sorry, you're actually in a meat market. You're just a product. There will be another one. Listen, and we don't care. I'm not just saying that.
I will believe you. I will. Sorry, Pums. I will believe you in. I will believe you in life. If you say you've got mental health issues, I will only believe you that you're taking it seriously and doing something to sort it out when you quit social media. Then I'll believe you, because that's number one. That is probably the greatest source of huge mental anguish and frustration and unnecessary pain for so many people. You've got to get off of that. If you do that, then I'll start seeing, oh, wait, this is someone who has mental health issues that they're trying to resolve. They're getting off of social media, because that's step number one, has to be. For anyone who's really going through a tough place, get out. No, get out. You're going to quit the team at the Olympics, but you're going to stay on Twitter? No. Guess where all the mental health problems are going to come from? Twitter, not from the Olympics. So get off of there. Help yourself, and then I'll meet you halfway.
Okay.
I don't know. Just an opinion. Anyway, listen, I'm also sad because she's so good that now we're not going to see her.
Great. Not good. Great. Yeah. I mean, great.
Correct. So
Simone Biles is great.
Who would have, and I mentioned just 2 days ago when we were talking about her. Remember, we were talking about how great she is. We were saying, I can't wait to see this woman do this amazing stuff with her body, and marvel at the fact that she's at the top of her game. That's probably why I'm cross too, because it's like, oh no, I don't get to see this.
And she is a gift. Like now, you know how people are now. It's if you dare hold this line, you just can't hold two positions at the same time. You know, she is great. She's been a gift to humanity. Like that doesn't change in my mind. I just grossly disagree with this part of her behavior, not her character. Well, she's been a gift.
Alvain says, and I think this is quite a good point, we'll also see more mental health problems with politicians. I meant to say most of them are dishonest and pretentious assholes. I mean, don't we currently have a deputy president who's in Russia? Watch him come up with an excuse for mental health. If Shabir Sheikh could have used that one back in the day and got away with it, we would have, because there used to be stigma. So it was embarrassing to admit you had mental health problems. So people didn't, because then you would lose track with the voters. Now, having mental health problems, everyone's like, oh, tell me about it, like Oprah would like to hear about it. And then suddenly you're taken very seriously. Let's see. All right, quick headline intervention here. We need to just see what's going on very briefly. So they're looking for the winner of the 158 million rand jackpot in the Powerball. Yes, it could be you. It could be you, Mbula.
What?
One incredibly lucky person somewhere in South Africa has turned into a multi-millionaire overnight thanks to the National Lotto, and the draw was held on Tuesday evening, and one ticket happened to match the 5 numbers and Powerball, bagging the player 158,035,647 rand. That's a lot of money, and that could be yours. Yes.
Is that like the biggest jackpot single winner we've ever had in the lotto? So. 158 million.
That's among the top 2 highest ever winnings in the lotto's history. So it's one of those top 2. And if those are your numbers, you better go and check your ticket. That's all I'm going to say. If you bought the lotto ticket for Tuesday evening, good for you. You could be 158 million rand richer. Now, that's an important headline. I'd love to be the one who gives news this morning that it was you who won. There is no quarantine for fully jabbed US and EU travelers. This is very good news. So if you have had the vaccine and you are ready to travel again, then apparently 4 a.m. Monday morning was the change coming into force. That was where it all happened. Only people who received their jabs in the UK could avoid quarantine before, except for France. But the UK government said the rule change would come in to reunite families and friends whose loved ones live abroad. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said it would apply to people who have been fully vaccinated with a jab approved by the US or EU, with a final dose at least 14 days before their arrival. So basically, this is to say you're free.
Let's go.
You're free to travel. So if you wanted to travel, you've been waiting for that, then this is the way that you can have it done. Okay, so that's how they see this whole thing rolling out. Very exciting stuff. You want one more before we wrap up the headlines? Let's talk about this unbelievable Transnet cyber attack. Did you hear the story?
I'm just saying my Russian theory. Just every day, new information comes out. I'm just like, y'all, my conspiracy, y'all. Because who else has the capacity to, like, it's not Rwanda. It's not Rwanda.
No.
Like hacking Transnet for what? But
well, there was a cyber attack at Transnet. It's a huge concern for people. It's impacting the delivery of perishable food, which is stuck in containers and freight trucks. The delay will push companies into looking at other ports in neighboring countries as an alternative. Transnet says authorities are investigating the cause of the IT disruptions. On Monday, they declared a force majeure with immediate effect as its terminals in Cape Town, Durban, Gqeberha, and Ngqura. And on Tuesday evening, Transnet announced an increase in the volume of containers and in and out of the ports as the supply chain started working again. So it's starting to happen. But I mean, poor Durban, they couldn't have had a shitter time, right?
yeah.
Sure.
Horrible.
So that's
All
like
right.
nerd looting kind of thing, you know? Like we did it on the ground, and now there's some guy sitting in his mom's basement asking for $30 billion from Transnet or whatever.
Yeah, it could well.
He's not in his mom's basement. He's like in the basement next to where basement keeping Didi Mbuza in.
Oh man, I feel like, don't you also?
Next door. This is Didi next door. This guy with his little computer in the Kremlin, deep in the belly of the Kremlin. It's happening, guys.
It's unbelievable. Well, I'm still trying to figure out. So what is it? Is it to bring us to a point where we're so
get the nuclear deal working?
Yeah, we're
get
so
the
broken.
Nuclear deal working,
and then things will happen. Well, I'm a big fan of nuclear energy. I just don't like the way the Russians do it, because they do shortcuts, and then we end up with a Chernobyl. I mean,
but people have taken their money now.
Yes, that's true. So that's probably why Didi's over there at the moment. That was a very good theory. I said to you the other day, I think that's a very valid theory.
Yeah, and in case you didn't see it, Gazprom sponsoring the Euros, so they are coming. They are coming. The Russians are coming. Gazprom was all over the Euros 2020, by the way, as one of the major sponsors. So Vladimir's got a plan.
As Daniel says, though, I mean, this is a very good point. Daniel says China was found responsible for a massive cyber attack on Microsoft Exchange servers, so don't discount the CCP in China. They're also crooks when it comes to doing this stuff. Tracy says that Russian poison, Novichok, could be involved in our deputy president. That is one scary poison. Where did the attack come from? Russia, and our deputy is there? Coincidence? Ooh, we're speculating, but yeah. Good stuff, says. Ask Edward Snowden. Maybe he knows something.
Apila my cable.
Courtney, but he's still there, right? Didi Mabuza. We don't know where he is.
Yeah.
Now, Cyril should fire him right now. Right now. If you haven't been to work for, 2 months?
There are people who have been at work and have not done job. There are so many people that need to be fired, guy. Where would the man start? That's why he's not firing anyone. He actually doesn't know who to start, who to fire first.
I was talking to somebody about the fact that when Pierre Botha, remember Pierre Botha, when he came in as president, he fired the entire intelligence department. He got rid of all of them, summarily sacked the whole lot, because he said, I can't trust you guys. You've been giving bad advice to my predecessors. You don't know what's going on. I'm hiring new people. And he put a whole new team in there. And the fact that he did that just proves that, if you come into a position, you have to have the stones to get rid of the people who are going to try and trip you up. And we've seen
all of them.
And we've seen that Cyril and his intelligence service, the NIH, as we call them in South Africa, NIA, National Intelligence, what are they called? Agency. And they've got this huge infrastructure. They've got a massive farm out in the east of Pretoria. They've got a huge budget. They had safes full of money in order to get things done. You remember all of that came out at the Zondo Commission. Now, these guys could not predict. Anyone could have predicted at least a little bit of noise and violence around Jacob Zuma's being arrested. These guys couldn't predict even that. They should all be fired. The lot. Get them out into the job market.
Contradiction in terms there. Central Intelligence Agency.
Exactly. One petty man called Sello Malema once said, "There's no intelligence here. We came to look. There's no intelligence here." Yeah, Sello Malema,
yeah.
Ooh, guys.
Carl says, this government is so useless. We were probably hacked by some 13-year-old playing Fortnite. It's also probably true. I reckon so intelligence, that's one. If you had to give me a government job, if you held a gun to my head and said you have to work for government, I would hate all the options. But the one job that might be really interesting is intelligence, because you can gather information, you can find out what's really going on, you can put those presidential briefings together every day, you can look at the threats and at the opportunities and at the weaknesses in our state, figure out ways to make sense of it. Don't you think that would be a fun job if you had to take a government job? I wouldn't mind running intelligence. That would be cool.
It would be cool. Reminds me of that spy museum in Berlin.
Yeah, we went to that. Fumi and I went to the spy museum. What an interesting place. And you could buy so many cool things there. You could buy like disappearing ink, and there were various things that you could actually buy a little device that would create like a wireless or Wi-Fi black hole. So you could actually you could put this thing on a table and it would disable Wi-Fi for like a meter or two around it. That's pretty cool. Isn't that amazing?
Intelligence
that is cool. It's like around government buildings. Huh?
Yeah, you could. Well, I mean, there already is a black hole of wireless around the government buildings because nobody's connected to any reality. Obi Kenobi says,
signal jammer.
Remember the signal jammer? And remember when they jammed Parliament? Obi Kenobi says the National Intelligence Agencies should be called the National Ignorance Agencies.
Well said. Well said.
Don't rule out an incompetent person having pressed delete by accident in the cyber attack. That's also possible, eh? It's totally possible. I mean, we are talking about transit.
What you got to hope is you got to hope old Doris Wase Home Affairs doesn't work there, because you know what they're saying is the system is down. Sorry, can you take a ship back to China? Yeah, well, go back to China. The system is offline. Come back next week. Can you go back to China with all of that fish? Yeah, come back next week.
Yeah. Did anybody stock up on alcohol this week? I want to know how all of our drinking friends who listen to the show are managing, because I mentioned that I went to the shops on Monday, and there was nobody in the liquor store. It was quiet. So people either already had stock. Yeah. It was very quiet. I mean, I thought Monday, there's no way I'm going to go near it, and I went and did my normal shopping. And on my way out of the normal shop, I saw that the liquor branch of that same shop was open, and there was nobody in there. I thought, that's very suspicious. The day after Cyril makes alcohol legal again for purchase, and so I popped in and just stocked up myself.
Although the tragedy is, when's month end tomorrow? Hey?
Yes, month end.
Oh no, so people are screwed. What are they going to do? You know, some people only get paid on the 30th.
Well, yeah, some people will get paid tomorrow, because they'll pay on the last Friday of the month, and they close. Yeah, that's correct. So if you didn't buy alcohol Monday Thursday. Yeah, that's the right move. This one.
Black Sam.
Black Sam.
Black.
So, all right, here's a good question, because I know everybody's sick of talking about coronavirus and lockdown, and really, to our credit, we haven't covered that this morning very much. But there is a question Mbulelo has. Where are you in your lockdown cycle at the moment? You know, there are those people it's just become exactly the normal routine. I mean, I was answering a question last night. I did this test just for fun. Yeah, I had to pay to do it, but I did an interesting test on kind of personality and all of that stuff. And one of the questions was, I like having a routine. And I'm exactly half and half on this one. So I had to answer number 3, which is neither yes nor no, right? Strongly agree is number 1. Strongly disagree is number 5. And I answered, I don't know, because a routine, what is a routine? I mean, this show is probably the only part of my life that is a routine. You know, I wake up the same time every Monday to Friday and I do the show for 2 hours. That's my routine. Everything outside of that isn't really a routine. I do some things every day, but they're all at different times. So I might go into the office, I might do some exercise, I might make breakfast, I might have meetings. Today I've got a 2 o'clock and then I've got a 6 o'clock that are quite important. Those are in the diary. But the rest of it is more or less, it's malleable. So I don't really have a routine for the weekdays. It's not the same every week. And I wonder how that is for most people. Have you also been able to completely change the way that you set up your diary? And where are you in the cycle? That's a good question. It's a really good question. I'm interested to know. What about you?
Tell us where he is in his cycle.
Yeah.
You know, largely speaking, again, my life hasn't changed. Like, I live close to work. I've been working. It's, you know, I exercise, like all of the things I was doing before. I've had the pleasure of not having to see people I didn't want to see anyway. So it's even better, actually. So I can really get into my routine. I would have been a 1 on that test. Routine is everything to me. So relatively speaking, stayed the same. It's just been so interesting to hear from my friends, again, just getting feedback and actually catching up with 1 or 2 people last night made me realize that, wow, this is not the same person at the beginning who was just like, okay, I'm baking bread, I'm at it, you know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to my health. And now all of a sudden she's starting to unravel a little bit because she can't travel and she can't see her gran in Portugal and all of these kinds of things. So I'm just wondering where people are. Are they still making...
Stop speaking about Simone Biles like that.
Oh my God. Oh man, but I don't know what people are doing now. Is the novelty completely worn off? Or, you know, spending time with your kids? I mean, Pumi, you're a parent. I'd love to know, like, where is it with having all your partners around all the time, having you and your partner working at home, children are around all the time. They're sick of you. You're probably sick of them. So I don't know where people are with that. I just know my friends are starting to really struggle.
Do you know how exciting it was on Monday when people went back to physical school? You have no idea. Whoa.
I was just about to say, Pumi's an honest parent. She's not just a parent. So she's going to say, yeah, she loves her kid, obviously. She's like, as soon as he could go back to school, you were ready, right?
No, but you guys, we have I don't think it's unique, but I think it's one of the small kind of unique arrangements we have. There is 2 people in this house. 2 people in this house and a small dog.
Right.
And this has been like the way that our life has been is insane. You can't go anywhere. You can't do it. It's just it's insane, and it's like it'll make you crazy. So routine for me has been a savior, right? You just, and it's the routine. There are lots of new things in the routine, like baking bread.
Yeah.
It's a big part of my routine every second day. It's totally, we love it. We don't eat like store-bought bread anymore. And the routine has helped. The other great thing, though, is being untethered. I used to tell you guys this at the beginning. It's being untethered from the clock. Because you don't have to be at school at a particular time. You can sleep in for an extra hour. I struggle to sleep, so that was brilliant, right? Because if you don't have to be up, except for today, if you don't have to be up at 6. And also, like, why are blankets so much warmer in the hour before you have to get out of bed?
Oh, you're so right. Oh my God, I woke up in the middle of the night last night, and I was so sad about waking up. I don't know what woke me, if it was a noise or it was my own brain or something. But I woke up at I don't know 1 a.m, and I was like, oh God, this is the worst, because I was just having the best sleep ever. And then you try for an hour or so to get back to sleep. And eventually when I did, I was having such a fat sleep, and then my alarm went off this morning. Oh God.
It's just, so I don't know. I mean, it definitely has changed the cycle. Organize your life, right? It has changed that, because your weekly shop, you're like trying to not make it at a time when you're in a super spreader event. You don't want to be there when all the queues are there. You don't want to be, so you kind of repositioned how those. So what cycle is that, Boo? What cycle is that?
I don't know. And it's, again, Gareth, you said something which a friend of mine responded to the other day, is it sounds insensitive, but I literally have not changed my life. Like, for me, without my routine, you don't want to deal with me. Like, that is locked in. Nobody gets that space of what I do when I want to do it, especially in the private life. And it's really probably insulated me, and I haven't had a full-on COVID experience, that everyone's have, because they're worried about everyone else.
You survived COVID. You made a huge big deal of it. You were like,
no, I mean, I'm a hero. No, that's, we're not going to discount me being a hero to millions and surviving COVID. And a lot of people are saying I'm the Rosa Parks of COVID. Without me,
Nelson Mandela went to jail for 27 years, and Bulelo had COVID. They were exactly the same.
And really, who's the hero there? I don't have a massive statue in Sandton Square that's showing everyone how great I was. I wake up every day and put on my pants one leg at a time, Nelson Mandela. So am I greater than Nelson Mandela? Let's ask that question, I'm not saying I am, but I'm happy to kind of ask the question.
Listen, we joke about that now, but like 5 or 6 years ago, if you'd even joked about that stuff, people just thought it was some kind of sacrilege. You couldn't joke about Madiba 6 years ago. People were hugely touchy about that.
He had a great sense of humor. I'm sure he'd be okay with it.
Oh yeah, no, obviously. But it's other people. It's never the person themselves who takes all of that hugely seriously. It's other people's acolytes. It's the disciples that come afterwards that spread the gospel.
And to those disciples, obviously, it's gone Nelson Mandela, Siya Kolisi, and now Mbulelo. So we're all closer. I'm just saying. I'm saying as well that you don't need to worry. Yeah, it's
it's a long line of heroes. Yeah.
As a hero myself, let me speak to one of my heroes, Sir Isaac Newton. He said, "If I can see further, it is because I stand on the shoulders of giants, and the Xhosa nation will rise."
A little known fact about Isaac Newton, also Xhosa.
Oh yeah, no. You've mispronounced it. Isaac Putin. Yeah, Putin.
All right, very good. I love it. So Matt says, "Hey guys, awesome show. Great news. I get to leave the 10-day UK hotel quarantine today after visiting my family back in South Africa. I'm already missing South Africa, but I'm glad not to be in a hotel room." That is a kind of prison. Like a friend of mine did exactly the same thing. She went over and she had her little kid with her. It was basically a newborn. And she was out here visiting her family and her in-laws. And then she suddenly got a ticket and she had to go back. She spent 10 or 12 days in quarantine. Wow. And they had guards. They had guards in the passages of the hotel. You could not leave your hotel room. If that isn't prison, I don't know what is, man. Really. It's wild, huh?
The Brits are such nanny state softies.
What is happening? Did they not get, isn't it you have to get a test like 72 hours, a negative test before you can travel? So that's not enough.
and then you still have to be locked up in a hotel room. And by the way, you get charged for that.
I was going to say, what? Yeah. And London prices, I would imagine, eh? Oh, my Lord.
Yeah.
And you can't quarantine at home. You can't,
No, you're only allowed. You're allowed out like a SPCA pet. You're allowed out into the country only once you've done your quarantine. I mean, this is literally what we do with pets. Pets go into quarantine when you travel overseas. So humans are being treated like animals because of this virus. I mean, it's insane. I would just not go. I'd say, you know what? I'll wait. I'll wait my time. I'll wait for the vaccine if that's what's necessary, but I'm not going to be stuck in a hotel room for 10 days. I would lose my mind being in a hotel room for 10 days. I'd go insane. You've got a tiny little room and you've got nothing to do. You can't do a damn thing. You can watch TV, lie in bed, and order room service.
And it's not like you're in Bazarito either. Like London is maybe the most, we're still in 1540 city in the world. You got to slightly get out of London actually to experience it. That's just like, oh my goodness. So just shoot me now. Oh.
Carlos, Mo Happy says, to Carla's point, it's really not the case. Unless we change things, we will be under some kind of lockdown forever. The next one will be environmental. Slowly our freedom is eroded. Okay, calm down. We'll take this freedom back, even if we have to do it at gunpoint. Trust me. This is what you're dealing with South Africa. We even have a day called Freedom Day, long before the British had theirs. And we saw South Africans are not afraid to go and set up their own roadblocks and protect their own communities if need be. So don't underestimate us. Coming up in a moment or two, the Burning Platform. I'm very, very excited for this. Very excited. So we're going to talk to Kanthan Pillay, who we haven't had on for a while. And Kanthan used to, of course, be co-host of the Burning Platform with Pumi. And he returns today for a reunion show with Pumi. And we got lots of questions for him. We're also going to be joined by Dr. Anthony Turton, who I'm very pleased to have on the show. And we'll speak to him about, among other things, about water, because this is something we should be thinking about. We've heard this from all the experts, but he's actually an expert in this field like no other. He's also a political scientist who specializes in transboundary resource management. He's a known professional speaker, trainer, and facilitator. You may have seen a letter that he wrote during all the violence which we experienced in KZN just 2.5 weeks ago. He wrote a very interesting piece which was being distributed virally on the internet and WhatsApp groups and all over the place. I certainly received it a few times. And we'll speak to Dr. Anthony Turton about that letter too. So lots to discuss with him, lots to discuss with Pumi and Kanthan. All of that on the way on cliffcentral.com. Coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
This week on Auto Central.
Really quick. I was blown away by the power delivery. It runs a 3-liter inline-6 twin-turbo diesel engine. This is a torque monster. It's been a long time since I've driven an SUV that has this amount of torque and just get up and go.
Catch Auto Central, SA's #1 motoring podcast, every Monday at 9 a.m.
Hi, my name is Martin Bosov. I'm the culture evangelist at King Price Insurance. So what culture? How culture? We do a little bit of a resilience program, the thing. Just quick things, strengthening them as individuals. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you might have read it, heard it 1,000 times, etc.
After the year you've had, we know all you want is a great economic quarter. Ijabuphilo ka knife and fork with a Nando's quarter chicken and any single side for only 49 Rand. Nando's. Fire it up.
Yes, indeed. CliffCentral.com, and we have lots to get to this morning, lots to talk about, and plenty of people on the Burning Platform to address all of your questions. The Burning Platform, as always, is brought to you by Nando's, and it's your chance once a week to check in on all the big stories that are going on, all the big concerns you may have in politics, in society, in the economy, and we get to talk to some really, really smart people. Chief among them is our own Pumi Mashiko. Hello, Pums. We also have we have return champion Kanthan Pillay. Hey, Kanthan, how are you?
Morning, guys. It's good to be back. Albeit for
Kanthan.
Yeah.
The Indians from Durban taking over.
Pumi, just especially for you, I brought my pink yarmulke today.
You look like a cardinal.
You look like a cardinal.
Yes. Yes, well.
What's the story? What's the story of the pink yarmulke?
It was actually one of the giveaways at a Jewish wedding that I went to in 2003. But I was wearing it today for a couple of reasons. The one is that my daughter has lost her great uncle who is Jewish. And the other is that I was watching Big Daddy Liberty's show briefly yesterday, and I thought, this is a good combination to actually hit them with.
Okay, very nice. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your daughter's great uncle. I'm sorry, obviously, to hear about anybody who's lost family and friends in the last little while, because we've just been motoring on. As soon as you hear stories like that, you think, oh, another person, another family, another individual who was making a contribution to society, and now they're gone. It's very
except you see, the problem is when it's people that you like. So I was quite fond of Leon. So yeah.
So I'm also pleased to welcome this morning Dr. Anthony Turton, who joins us also from his home. So we've got everybody at home, but we're all part of the show this morning. So Dr. Turton, nice to see you. Thank you very much for making some time for us.
Good morning to you and the listeners. Nice to be on board.
Very good. So we got lots to talk about today. I'll start off with Anthony. Now, of course, you're a political scientist. You specialize in transboundary resource management. Something Kanthan is probably going to want to talk about in a short while is water. But let's just talk about that letter of yours that went round during the riots and looting in Durban. I'm sure you were surprised by how quickly people picked up on it and passed it around, and how many people were suddenly aware of stuff that is usually in the realm of political science. Obviously, everybody was nervous about what was going on, but I think it struck a chord. And the gist of what you were saying is, you know what? I'm not surprised by the fact that the intelligence services have not delivered the way that they should have. And you also said it's amazing how communities will stand together in times like this and do the right thing.
Yes, indeed. I happen to be an analytical person. I always have been my whole life, and I happen to have served as an intelligence officer during our transition to democracy. In fact, I was party to the establishment of the intelligence framework and structures on which CODESA was based. And in that process, I was actually deployed out into Eastern Europe in 1989. Because at that point in time, the USSR had collapsed and Russia was receding, and we wanted to know if Russia was going to come to the assistance of the various countries around the world, because if they weren't, then we could in fact negotiate without fear of external interference. And during that period of time, I witnessed a number of absolutely monumental events taking place, most notably the dismantling of the Iron Curtain, and I saw states fall one by one. States that I thought in my lifetime we would never see falling. So I got a sense 2 weeks ago in KZN that we were seeing a pivotal moment in South Africa as well. Literally the moment where a completely new thing was born. And I can expand on that if you want to, but that's what prompted me to write that, because I wrote it as an analytical piece just to help myself kind of make sense of what's going on, but then also because I shared it, other people also got some sort of sense out of it. So yeah, I'm very glad that it went there.
Terrific. It's very, very good stuff. I know Pumi and Kanthan have got a whole bunch of questions for you, and I'm just thinking when you brought up Russia and you brought up Eastern Europe, there's so much we've got to get into with Didi Mabuza and with this cyber attack. And Pumi and I were talking about it this morning already. So we could go there immediately. But let's just talk about water, because very often on the Burning Platform, we get bogged down in current affairs and we start talking about them and we go round and round in circles. Water is something that I know is of huge, paramount importance to all of us, because we don't really think about it until we don't have it. And when we don't have it, it is all we think about. And we have a problem in this country. We constantly get told by people we're a water scarce state, and we need to protect our water. We haven't really built any new dams in the last 20 years, as far as I can tell. We haven't necessarily been managing what water we have very well up to now. The Department of Water Affairs and Sanitation has been mismanaged horrendously over the past while. And ordinary people are concerned that one day they might turn on the tap and nothing comes out, even though they're paying their rates and taxes. And of course, there are so many people in this country who've never had a tap to turn on because it's never been provided to them infrastructurally. Where are you on water, and what can you tell us about what the future of water in this country might look like?
Well, yeah, Gareth, you've said a lot of stuff there, about South Africa being a water-constrained country. We have always been a water-constrained country. The first book that was ever written about water resource management was written by a man called J.C. Brown in 1840s, around about there, talking about the aridity of the Cape Colony and reasons for the aridity, which he blamed on lazy local people, as they were wont to do in those days. And he called for the construction of dams. And that led in 1850, 1860 to the first book written by a South African, a man called Baines, Thomas Bain, a road engineer. He wrote a book on dam building, water finding dam building, and he basically created this sort of hydraulic mission for a future South Africa. And if you fast forward from that, from his book was published in about 1860, and it took a century of time for his idea, which was to take water from the Orange River, roughly near Uppington, and to relay through a series of canals over the escarpment into Port Elizabeth. It took a century for that idea, from 1850 to 1960, for that idea to basically take root, and that became the foundation of our industrializing economy. This whole idea of engineered water systems. So, we have always been water constrained. That is why the Department of Water Affairs was created. They were created to manage that uncertainty. And of course, we now live in a highly engineered hydraulic system, where, for example, Johannesburg is the only city in the world not on a river, not on a lake, not on a waterfront, but on a continental watershed divide. So we're talking in the Gauteng province of about 40% of the population of the country, that sustains about 60% of the economic output of the country. That's 100% reliant on our ability to pump water uphill from distant river basins, using surplus energy that we no longer have. And this is seriously a problem, because there's another problem that comes out of that. Because the Gauteng area is so industrialized, and because it's on the watershed divide, all of the sewage return flows go back into rivers upstream of someone else's drinking water. So we are now recycling untreated sewage, and that's just simply a fact of life, because we need engineers, we need smart people to run these systems. They've taken a century to build, and it's taken 2 decades to break up.
My God, frightening spectre that. Kanthan, I know this is close to your heart. Do you want to talk to Anthony? And Pumi, I know you've got questions too.
Yeah, Gareth, you and I touched on this yesterday over lunch. The entire idea of looking at water as the next thing that we need to be concentrating on. I'm going to disagree with Anthony at one fundamental level, with the entire concept of us being a water scarce country. I don't think that there's such a thing as a water scarce country. I think we have mismanaged resources. And if you want an example of why this is so, just take a look at Israel, because they literally pluck water out of the air and they keep that entire part of the Middle East alive. In fact, all Israel wants to do, if they want to actually cause serious cut in terms of the Palestinian territories, is to just turn off the water supply, because all of that water that they get in both the West Bank and Gaza comes from Israel. So what I'm trying to say is that the thought processes that were in place at the time of Thomas Paine are completely irrelevant in terms of how we should be looking at water supplies today. We really should be looking at a scenario where we are doing far more water harvesting in the rainfall catchment areas. And in Johannesburg especially, we have almost every day during the summer, almost like clockwork, at 5 o'clock in the evening, you'll have a thunderstorm. And all of that ends up in all of these little rivers that we have around Johannesburg. The Yuxke runs about 400 meters away from my home. And all of that, the rain from this area just flows into the Yuxke. From the Yuxke, flows into the Crocodile, and eventually it just ends up not being used. When we get to the point of saying, let's forget the way in which we used to manage water in the past. Let's forget about the fact that building great dams was the way in which we used to do things, because we also know today the environmental consequences of dam building in terms of downstream wildlife that used to be supported by that water supply. All of these things we need to actually be looking at changing. But I think it starts with something that we've talked about on the show several times, the idea of going off grid in terms of your own water supply. Invest that money on putting in that septic tank, invest that money in putting in that borehole, and then put in the water purification systems that today will now end up being powered by solar. So you are creating less dependence on the traditional infrastructure. I don't have any hopes whatsoever that the ANC government is ever going to be able to address the backlog that we have just in terms of maintenance of the existing water infrastructure that was handed over by the apartheid regime. It's just not going to happen. The backlog is just so massive. So we need to start looking at alternatives. It's kind of exactly like Africa ended up leapfrogging the entire landline rollout by just going directly to mobile. We need to look at things that are kind of similar.
What do you say to that, Anthony?
Yeah, look, I agree. Funny enough, I mean, I'm not at any issue with any of the points that you've made there. I gave a talk at GIBS, the Gordon Institute of Business Science, a couple of years ago, so it's available in video clip on YouTube somewhere, where I spoke about the fact that South Africa is not water constrained. We are, in fact, ingenuity constrained, without any question of doubt. Okay, but I'm busy right now as we speak, establishing an entity in the Middle East where we are bringing together a hub, literally to foster new innovation and to bring that into face-to-face contact with investors into next generation technology. The reality of the situation, I mean, it's a very complex issue, and we can simplify it here. But the reality of the situation is that we are only constrained by the amount of fresh water available on the planet. The planet is 2/3 water, 2/3 ocean. Of the total volume of water on the planet, only less than 2% of that water is fresh water, and that fresh water, that's what we have constrained. Okay, and I can go down into a lot of numbers, but the important thing is that water is a flux that moves in time and space, but we manage it as a stock. The stock is a finite volume that you use once and throw away. So that's the fundamental problem. In fact, later on today, I'm talking on a webinar about how we're going to spend this 1 trillion rand that is needed just to repair our broken hydraulic system in South Africa. 1 trillion rand is needed, not to take it to the next generation technology, just to fix what's broken. Okay, so how are we going to raise that money? What are you going to do with that money, etc. So ultimately, I'll just give you some numbers because once you understand the numbers, then you can see we can really ground this debate in some reality. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 numbers. The first number is 48 billion cubic meters, 48 BCM. That number used to be 53, and that is the total volume of all the water available in all of our rivers. And if you go back, if you want to unpack that now, if you want to get back into some sort of bigger science, okay, our fundamental problem in Africa is our conversion of rainfall into runoff. If you take 100 units of rain falling out of the sky, in Africa, 20 units of rain end up in the river, 80 units of rain go somewhere else. They get lost to evaporation. But if you look in South Africa, only 8 units of rain end up in the river. So we lose 92 units of rainfall for every 100 units of rainfall. 92 units are lost to evaporation. Our problem is an evaporation problem, not a storage problem. And if you convert that now, that what's called stream flow, If you convert that stream flow, which is now the 8 units, into something useful, basically you want to store it in a dam. There's no other way to store water other than in a dam, although there are new emerging technologies. But if you take, for example, 100% of the stream flow of the Orange River, we've built almost 3 times more storage capacity than we have water in the river. So we cannot build any more dams. That's the whole problem. We can't build dams. So when people get this bankrupt idea, we'll just build another dam. Well, they so lost this in a century ago thinking that it's just not going to happen. So 53 is what we used to have. We've now revised it down systematically down to 48. With climate change, with all kinds of environmental things happening, etc. So that's the total volume we have in all of our rivers. Now the next number is 38 billion cubic meters, which is the total volume of all of the water in all of our dams. That's our storage capacity. So 38 is less than 40. So unimaginative people say, well, we can store another 10 more. No, we can't, because then we turn the rivers into open sewers. The river has to still perform ecological activities. It has to still clean itself up, etc., because it's the receiving water body for all of our waste. So 38 is as big as we are going to get. Now the kicker, now the big number. In 2035, if we're going to create full employment for all of our angry, frustrated people, if we're going to create full employment, we need 63 BCM. Our challenge is how to turn 38 into 63. That is our technical challenge. That is what I've been trying to get our president to say on a public platform for the last 15 years, and I have to say I've become a dismal failure in that regard.
Sure.
What we've got to do is we've got to recycle our total volume of water 1.16 times, multiply 38 by 1.6, and you're there, bingo, there you're at 63. That's the future vision of our country. That is the investment platform. That is the Marshall Plan. That is how we can use water infrastructure to basically kickstart our economy and just start bringing people back into employment. But we've got to
I want to bring Pumi in here. You look like you got a question, Pums. Go for it.
Well, I do have a question, and my question is always around how that opportunity translates for young people today studying engineering, for companies starting up. There is an opportunity to privately, outside of government, leave them alone with their inefficiency, that we can create those kinds of jobs and those kinds of opportunities and that kind of water security privately. Is it possible?
Yes, I think we have to start creating an enabling environment for those. You see, because ultimately we've got to manage water as nature managed water. The water you put in your mouth this morning when you clean your teeth went through a dinosaur's kidney 65 million years ago. This is a fact. All of our water is recycled. All of our water is recycled. So right. we've got to be with nature, but we've got to use technology. And there's all kinds of really important things in this new economy coming out. And one of the things that's happening in the new economy now is that desalination is becoming more and more efficient. And part of that efficiency is because we are also looking at solar. We're looking at solar power, alternative energy sources. But now it gets even more interesting because we're looking at the hydrogen economy, which we're looking at in the Middle Eastern place that I'm working on, where we're looking at the hydrogen economy, where you use electricity generated by solar or wind to basically split water into hydrogen and oxygen. That's what the Jeff flight to place the other day was about launching the hydrogen economy. But when you do that, you actually use hydrogen as a store for energy you can use some other time in some other place. So now we've got a whole new change in economic terms, in socio-economic terms, and this is the kind of exciting thing that we should be talking about. We've tried to establish in South Africa. It's always consistently on deaf ears. So we're now taking our efforts to the world where people are they're setting it up. It's happening because they realise that this is the way to go.
I think this
Gareth,
is
a huge echo. Is there anything? Can the guys at the studio do something? I have a huge echo, and I think a lot of people are having the same problem.
Okay, we'll see if we can figure that out, Pums. I'm gonna make some changes on my side to the settings. But let's just talk about change. Let's get on to some of the more pressing issues that are going on in society, and I'd like to bring in Kanthan, Pumi, and Anthony on these things because there are a lot of questions that are being thrown around here. So we got a series of questions from Jocelyn, who's been listening to the show. Hey, Kanthan, glad you're back. Was it an insurrection? Do you think the events of the last 2 weeks were enough to give government leadership a wake-up call? And what is your read on policy impact with regard to gun law changes in the light of what we saw? That's a lot of questions from Jocelyn, but I'm sure, Kanthan, you've been bristling to answer them. So you start off, and if Anthony and Pumi have anything to add.
It was an insurrection, but it was an ANC insurrection. It was not a South African insurrection. This was an attempt to overthrow Ramaphosa within the ANC's ranks itself. And we happen to get caught in the crossfire. That's my take on that particular question. Pumi, what's your take?
What the ANC tried to overthrow the ANC, Kanthan.
Exactly.
Well, we have, everyone knows my take on this. And I think that, unfortunately, what we've come to see is the inefficiency of leadership within not just the ANC, but within our government, come to a place where the inequalities in our society and the people's pent-up frustrations have spilled out onto the street. But also, there's I have a conspiracy theory as well, that there's also a bigger head at play. Gareth, don't laugh at me like this. I'm telling you, we're going to be back here 6 months from now, and we're going to be watching DD going, how did we get here? And it's going to be because there's a political economic play that is beyond that the ANC just doesn't have, that Cyril Ramaphosa in particular as the president does not have the requisite skill to deal with that level of complexity. There are many moving parts here, and he's just unable to hold it all together, to pull the people to corral the squirrels into a particular direction. And that's what we're seeing. It's bursting at the seams.
Gareth, again, just to touch on a point that you and I discussed briefly yesterday, but since Anthony's with us, I'd like to get his input on this. One of the issues that was very clear from this is that there was a complete failure in terms of the National Intelligence Services to give any information to Ramaphosa. And I was throwing back to a scenario, I think it was late 70s, early 80s. I think it was around 78, 79. When Pierre Botha came into power. And the first thing that he did was he completely gutted state security. I mean, he just basically, I think it used to be called BOSS, Bureau of State Security, and he tossed it out of the way, and he set up an entirely new intelligence service from scratch on the basis that he needed to have credible intelligence, as opposed to the Ramaphosa scenario that we have right now, where he's basically taken an entire intelligence service that has been put in place with his extremely hostile predecessor over the past decade. And he's expecting them to provide him with reliable information. And so much is true in so many departments. We touched on this in terms of the National Prosecution Authority. Again, exactly the same problem. It's all nice and well to put in Shamila Batoy as head of the NPA, but when she has all of the Jacob Zuma deployees under her, how is she actually supposed to prosecute anything when the dockets are immediately going to be handed over to the people that are being investigated? So, Anthony, you were there at the time, I guess. So maybe some insight into what went down at the time.
Yes, okay. Well, look, you've asked a lot of questions there. I don't know if we've got enough time, but let me just quickly give you an answer to this. Was it insurrection? Yes, I think what it was a very sophisticated attempt run by very smart people to try and lubricate the traditional cleavage lines of South Africa, which is race. And in that regard, it failed. It was an insurrection, an internal power struggle within the ANC, trying to lubricate the lines of race, but a spectacular failure. To answer your other question, Yes, it's a lot more complex than you've made it out there. P.W. Botha, when he came to power, you must remember he overthrew B.J. Foster, and B.J. Foster came unstuck over the info scandal, and the info scandal was about the Bureau of State Security waylaying, in fact, 30 million rands worth of money. So they took 30 million rands of money out of one budget and they put it in another budget, and for that they were in trouble. Now, if you fast forward that, what Jacob Zuma did when he became president, I remember he became president through an internal, what I would call an internal putsch, or an internal coup, for want of a better word, at Polokwane, where he used elements of the intelligence apparatus, but they were external to the service at that point in time. He used them to actually put himself in power. So one of the first things he did when he came to power was he merged the South African Secret Service, where I used to be a staff officer, with the National Intelligence Agency, the internal service. He merged them into a thing called the State Security Agency, the SSA, which really mirrors BOSS. It's exactly the same as what BOSS used to do. The only difference being now that the Zondo Commission of Inquiry has indicated that they've misappropriated over R1 billion. So it's orders and orders of magnitude worse than BOSS. But that's what they're doing now. They engaged in completely illegal activity because I was involved in the initial setting up of our democratic oversight structures for our intelligence services. And in fact, the reason why I'm not still a serving member of the intelligence community is precisely because of the internal power struggles that were waged over the time that Jacob Zuma was making his move to come into power. And I was one of the guys that I decided to jump before I was pushed. But it was, the writing was clearly on the wall that this is where it was going.
I have a question. You talk about extremely intelligent and sophisticated players who try to create this, who try to expropriate and also exploit a cleavage that is already there. Who, in all of the players that we know, is sophisticated enough to pull that off? Is it Jacob Zuma's camp? I'm interested to know who you think is as sophisticated and as organized and as intelligent as what it took to create the havoc that we saw in the past 2 weeks and still continue to see. If I look at what's happening in Cape Town with the taxi violence, it's a very similar. They've taken advantage of what in Cape Town would isolate Cape Town and create chaos there, and are using that to create chaos. What's happening with Transnet, I don't think these are all isolated incidences. Who has that capacity?
Yeah, I can easily answer that one because I was working on that matter before I found myself per G. Okay, what was very evident in the work that we were doing at that point in time? We were doing work just to give you some historic context in the transition to democracy. The police forces were completely in disarray because of the Harms Commission of Inquiry and all of the hit squad activities and the flak blasters and all of that kind of dirty tricks department. Okay, so the police department was in disarray, and as a result of it, there was never the ability to create a crime intelligence capability. And you still hear today crime intelligence always about this infighting in crime intelligence. It's never been stable from the time we transitioned. Okay, so at that point in time, a decision was made because of the experience that my team had in specialist work that we had been doing to, as part of the enabling environment for CODESA to take place. A decision was made to place under my control an experimental unit looking at crime intelligence, and we started looking at cash and transit heists. In those days, crash and transfer was a big issue, and we deployed a special forces team, ex-recce's. In fact, we deployed into the field, and we started making stunning successes. But be that as it may, what we discovered at that point in time is a very sophisticated criminal syndicate at work, extremely sophisticated. These are not the politicians that you see, on Facebook. You must appreciate now, if we zoom out, what Jacob Zuma did in his presidency. He effectively stole a quarter of the GDP of the country, 25% of the GDP of the country. And that's a big number. And that quarter of the GDP of the country, it might even be bigger once we know know more details. But in order to move that kind of money out of the country, you need a sophisticated network of money launderers, etc. And that is also what gives me hope, because that means that it's not the South African prosecuting authority that's interested in this matter. We're not talking about the FBI. We're talking about the American Secret Service, because dollars were involved, money laundering was involved, etc. So I am convinced that this is actually the silver lining in that whole dark day, because now we've got the big boys in the room. Now we don't see them. They're behind there. They don't come out on Twitter and make little statements of what they're doing. Okay, they just do it, and this is what's going to be coming down in the near future. So yes, it was extremely sophisticated. The messaging was sophisticated. It was almost military precision. And in fact, I can zoom back. I live in the Ugu district, district municipality of KZN, centered on Port Shepstone. And for the last 2 years, we've been seeing surgical strikes, surgical military special force precision type of strikes against water infrastructure. A certain valve is taken out, a certain pump is destroyed, a piece of pipeline is taken out, but it's not just any piece of pipeline. It's a piece of pipeline that is very difficult to replace, and it means that reservoir is going to drain, and you're going to be without water for a month. Okay, so this speaks to a sophisticated targeting, command and control capability. So there's no question of doubt that there was a lot of sophistication in this thing. The puppets that you see, the politicians, they're just the stooges. They're just the beneficiaries. They are the enablers for the trough feeders to feed off the trough. Okay? But we're dealing with this undercurrent. We're dealing with a very sophisticated undercurrent. And don't underestimate those people. They will fight back. They will fight back.
The thieves always do. The thieves always do. Yeah. They don't want to lose their...
So, Kanthan, you didn't get into it, but guns was a part of Jocelyn's question, and then we'll move on to some of the other questions that people have. But gun laws in South Africa, and the fact that there are lobbies who are trying to petition government to bring in even stricter gun laws. I don't know how that's going to help, because the problem isn't legal gun owners. The problem seems to me to be criminals with guns, and even the police, you could say, are the biggest problem here. So what do you have to say about that? And then I'd like Anthony and Pumi's comments on that one too before we move on.
Well, there are two things that I'm going to say, which, again, I've said on the show in the past. There are two things that give me great comfort living in South Africa. The first thing that gives me great comfort is the fact that we have the most incompetent military on the entire planet. The second thing that gives me great comfort is the fact that we have a populace that across the board is heavily armed. And what effectively has happened as a result of this entire fiasco over the past couple of weeks is that it's made it incredibly difficult for Ramaphosa to now insist that firearms be banned for self-defense. Because in terms of the Firearms Control Act, that was kind of underpinning it, the entire idea that you were not allowed to carry a firearm for self-defense anymore. And the situation that we're going to have right now is that if they try to get that through Parliament, trust me, that's going to be challenged in court. And any judge that ends up saying that that law is actually valid and has to go through Parliament, any judge who says that, yes, it is constitutional, trust me, there are going to be people who are going to be extremely pissed off. And I don't believe that any judge in their right mind is going to turn around and say, we're going to disarm the populace of South Africa. So it's actually given us, I think, an opportunity. And, for those of us who for years have been talking about the importance of legal gun ownership, and you might remember when I started the ZACP, that was one of our 10 core principles. We wanted firearm ownership for self-defense. And we took a lot of flack at the time, primarily from the lobbyists from people like Gun Free South Africa. And, I'd be really interested in knowing who are the people who are actually funding those guys. Because if you get to the bottom of why NGOs want to disarm a populace in a violent society and hand power to be able to enforce execution by firearm only in the hands of government, we need to find out why they are pushing that particular agenda, who is funding them, where is that money coming from, what is their agenda.
Good point. Anthony, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, look, I think this whole gun debate, I'm kind of ambivalent about guns. I'm not a gun lover. Although I've grown up in a gun culture, and I'm an ex-soldier, and I understand firearms, and all of my friends and buddies are all gun owners. But nonetheless, I think what's happened in the last 2 weeks is clearly we've seen a failing state. The state has completely shown its inability to fill the vacuum that was filled, in fact, by what I've called in my writing. I've called them militia, because in some cases they were organized community policing forums. In other cases, they just simply were spontaneously created, and they were all armed. And being a trained observer, I was going around to the barricades and observing what was going on. And what I saw there was quite remarkable, because one of the elements of what I saw there was the emergence of firearms that are no longer in need of having to be licensed, because they're propelled by carbon dioxide gas, etc. It's not an explosive charge that propels them. And these things are lethal. These things are absolutely lethal, but they don't need to be licensed. I've seen people with crossbows. I've even saw a young kid up in Pietermaritzburg shooting people with a catty. Okay, and he dropped somebody with a catty. So believe me, if we're talking about this, about this whole gun ownership, you can only enforce gun control when the state is strong enough to actually show its presence beyond the mere symbolism of being in power. And driving down a highway in the blue light brigade is a symbol of power, but it's nowhere near the reality of control. Power and control, not the same thing.
Pums, you're nodding your head in agreement and smiling.
Well, yeah, because laws are only as effective as they can be policed. If you can't enforce it, there's no point in having that law. And that's the one thing, as Kanthan says, the incompetence of our government gives us hope. Because how are they going to police that? That's.
Can I just make one small little observation, okay? Just to show you what the pressure that the police were under. On the south coast, just south of Durban, there's a small community of people that came under enormous pressure. The police were completely overwhelmed there. They ran out of ammunition. They reached out to the private sector, private players, private actors, got the ammunition for the police. They procured the ammunition for the police force, okay? So there is one case study on its own, okay, where the private sector was more efficient at providing ammunition to the police than they were unable to do it.
Yeah, then you have a finance minister that comes out with austerity measures, and his austerity measures are: we're going to cut the budget to the police force, we're going to cut the budget to the army. We have just had 2 weeks of mayhem, and we've seen how under-resourced those two services are. And actually, the best thing that we can do is we're going to cut their budget. Come on.
Okay, how's this for two paradoxes? Just two quick paradoxes. The first paradox is the arms deal, the original sin that started all of this drama for Jacob Gedleyihlekisha Zuma, has left the armed forces weaker and less able to respond, okay, than before. Okay, that is a simple fact of the matter, okay? And the other one, the other one is just sorry, it's gone off my mind now. The second one.
That's all right. I mean, listen, I want to get to something else.
The second one's back. Okay? So here we're talking about austerity. And just about a month or maybe 2 months ago, we had our president defending the fact that members of parliament who earn in excess of R1 million a year of salary make ends meet. Okay, I mean, how out of context is that? How is that not a moment of let them eat? I mean,
it's insulting to ordinary people. I mean, we've got such high unemployment, and he's busy saying, well, parliamentarians can only live on R1 million a month. It's criminal to make them live under anything less.
Yes, but the rest of us can live on 350 Rand a month, Gareth.
Sure. And I do see, this is an interesting point. I wasn't going to bring it up this morning because we've got so much on the agenda. But, I see the news, all the know-it-alls in the general news media saying it's so important that we have this 350 Rand a month given to poor people. It's always these media types who appoint themselves with a mandate from the poor. And they're saying it's really important that we extend this beyond March. First of all, I want to know who they think is going to pay for that. Second of all, aren't you sick of hearing patronizing statements from people in the media and politicians generally about how ordinary people can manage with 350 Rand extra from the government every month? That's going to make them exactly how independent in the future? It's outrageous that people are even having this conversation. Every time I hear it on TV, it just drives me mad. Am I the only one?
I have a quick way to fund that 350 Rand a month. Just change the minimum wage in the country to 350 Rand a month. And suddenly you'll have full employment.
There we go.
It's as simple as that. But if you turn around and tell the self-same media pundits, let's just make the minimum wage 350 Rand a month, they'll say, oh no, people can't possibly survive on 350 Rand a month. You must be mad. And
Hypocrisy.
Contradiction City is really big. Gareth, just to get off the doom and gloom for a second, one of the questions that someone asked me was, how can we turn our reputation around and attract investment again?
Yeah.
And I just thought I'd toss that out here.
Well, go for it. I mean, this is a very valid thing because we are looking at a situation where generally the South African stock market has been lackluster. We've seen a huge amount of disinterest and disinvestment. And when we see violence like we saw in KZN, tourism certainly is down. Tourism is a major addition to our revenue sources in this country. But we've also got people who are actively divesting. They're taking their money elsewhere because they think now, based on what we saw 2.5 weeks ago, that this is a dangerous place to put your money. How can we turn that around, Kanthan? Where do you want to go?
Okay,
Anthony, you go first.
All right, Anthony, you go first. Yeah.
This little webinar we're giving later on today is about this topic here. Water is an economic enabler. Water is the absolute ultimate economic enabler. And you can look at anywhere in the world where you don't have water, where you don't have reliable water supply, you don't have economic activity. So we believe that this investment of 1 trillion Rand that we've got to raise now into the water sector is part and parcel of that Marshall Plan, part and parcel of the reinstatement of the tarnished trust and reputation of the country. South Africa is a country of enormous possibilities. And in fact, to really talk about the exciting stuff here, if you look today at your kind of generation, the people whose faces are in front of me here now, your generation in general has lived your entire life with profound uncertainty. Within that generation, there is a crucible of energy, of power, of knowledge that's quite remarkable. If you start harnessing those people and aiming them in the right direction and resourcing them correctly, we have got all that we need, the necessary conditions for a major economic upkick in the future. Remember, I'll just give you another number. 25% of our GDP was stolen. Another 25% of our GDP has left the country as foreign direct investment, ordinary people's savings that people are fearful of keeping money in the country. That's 50% of our GDP gone. Now we want to talk about giving 350 Rand grant to people. Who's going to sustain that? Where's the tax base to sustain that? So we've got to literally get excited again about South Africa as an investment destination. We've got to start looking at this whole recycling economy, this whole circular economy. Everything that
I like
entails.
that, and I mean that dovetails very nicely into the rising tide of excitement around sustainability worldwide. There's a huge environmental lobby in places like Europe, and those people are looking for places to put their money, and they're not getting returns in their own countries. So what you're saying, Anthony, is bring it here. Kanthan, where do you want to see that money going, and how do we attract more of it?
Look, I think that the money is going to continue to come to South Africa, but it's not going to come through the official channels. Where we are going to actually score big over the next decade or so is in terms of the intellectual capital economy. But that's not money that's going to flow through established, through any of our financial systems in this country. Let me give you a very specific example. If you look in terms of people who work in the creative industries, people who work in marketing, people who work in terms of advertising, people who work in terms of film editing, those are things that can be done by highly skilled people in South Africa at relatively low cost. And all of that work can come from outside the country. But at the same time, would any right-thinking peer person with those skills in our country want to be setting up a company here in order to be able to get that money when you have to give a percentage of your company off to rent seekers in the form of black economic empowerment? The answer is no. What you do is you set up an offshore company in places that allow for electronic citizenship, like Estonia, and you provide the services in South Africa, but you end up billing obviously at a rand-denominated price, but the money stays outside the country. That money just goes into a safe little offshore account, and you bring as much in as you need in order to sustain yourself. So I think that this is a business model that is already in place by a large number of people, and it's only going to grow simply because of the fact that you don't want to be farming off a portion of your business to state incompetence, to black economic empowerment, to high taxes, all of those things. Cut yourself loose from the tax net completely.
Well,
that's where we are going to see growth.
We've seen so many South African companies registering their head offices in places like Mauritius too, for this very reason, right?
Sure, that's exactly the point. Why would you be wanting to pay the outrageously high taxes that we pay out here when money wants to move wherever it happens to be freest? Now, going back to the Marshall Plan that Anthony's talking about, look, I've no doubt that the trillion rand will be set aside, and I've no doubt that that trillion rand will be stolen. And it's not going to actually filter down to the ground level. But what I can see happening, and if you particularly look in terms of the secessionist thought process that's been gripping much of the country right now, and if you look particularly in terms of the West Coast, in other words, of the Western Cape, which is one of the most arid regions around, but there's the Atlantic sitting right next to it. And if you have the capacity to actually put in place desalination plants that are powered by solar, because you've got solar energy throughout the year, then you're able to actually desalinate enough water to be able to actually turn that into one of the most fertile parts of the country. And again, that money is only going to come from the private sector. So if you're asking me where my enthusiasm is going to come from, I think it's going to come in places where government is not going to be in a position to do any rent seeking.
Only a few of those left. Pums, do you want to add to that?
Well, first I want to say Dr. Anthony cannot leave the show today without telling us about his webinar and how people can get to that webinar, because I do think that our salvation, is that the right word, for South Africa really lies within the ingenuity of South Africans. South Africans are incredible people with incredible ideas, and the first thing we have to divorce ourselves from is this thinking that government is going to be there for us. There's going to be the one that's going to create the enabling environment. We leave them out of it. We've got to find the ways and opportunities that are going to make us have the money that we need to be able to live. Kanthan, you talk about digital citizenship. We just published a book on Amazon, and you get a Payoneer account. Everything gets paid through that, and if you need that money, you can put it into your Standard Bank account or whatever. But I mean, there's so many different things that in order to make the world work, you really, really, really don't need the South African government to make it happen. You just have to export your skills, your brain, and your ability, and you can still stay here in sunshiny South Africa.
Okay, you asked me about this thing later on today. It's the Cape Business Network, CBN. I will send you a link after we go offline here, if that's okay.
Right.
With you.
Yeah, we'll post that on cliffcentral.com. No problem at all. Okay, so there's something I just want to quickly go back from the hopeful stuff to the hopeless stuff. There's a question I got from one of our listeners. I think it's an important one because we touched on this briefly the other day, Pumi. I hear people like Sebenzile Nkambule on Power 98.7 trying to agitate Zulus against Indians with dangerous narratives of the Phoenix massacre. And I was wondering if you guys had any comments on this, if the focus could maybe be changed to the lack of effective policing, because that is the cause of so much instability in places like that. But we do see these old fault lines rearing their ugly heads again. It seems an obvious and a convenient excuse for politicians to use and for their lackeys in the media to be using. We don't need to pit Zulus against Indians in KwaZulu-Natal. This is not good for anybody.
Well, it happens in cycles, because you remember 1949 was the first time this actually happened, and they found an utterly defenseless populace at the time, and that was a massacre of note that took place in 1949. Similar thing happened in the Inanda riots of 1985. And I think that the change that happened today was, for the first time, they found a populace that was not defenseless. And the interesting thing for me is we still don't have an accurate figure in terms of what the death toll was in terms of Phoenix. So everyone has been trotting around these figures. I have not had any official figures whatsoever in terms of how many people actually lost their lives at the time. And if anyone here can throw light on that, I'd be really interested in it. But the crucial point for me is that it was an attempt to actually sow division between Indians and Zulus in KZN, and I think it failed miserably. Because if you look in terms of the way in which those self-defense units were set up throughout KZN, across the board, they were community-based and they were not race-based. It just so happened that because Phoenix happens to be an apartheid-era township founded in 1976, remember, people were actually taken and dumped into Phoenix, and it built itself up into a township.
That's right.
So because of that, the fact that the overwhelming majority of the people who live in Phoenix just happen to be Indian, they ended up using that as a convenient excuse, just simply based on logistics. But I think using the rest of the country as an example of how it was communities that came together, it's going to be very hard for them to justify that narrative.
Yeah, sure. I can add on to that by saying two things I'd like to say. Number one is, immediately after that happened, the Zulu King came out and made a very powerful statement that the Zulu people are not in any way angry with the Indian community. So that was a failed attempt to duplicate that fault line that I mentioned earlier on. And then the other thing is, being a military veteran myself, I'm networking to the military veteran community, and a number of military veterans were manning the different roadblocks in different parts of Durban and Pietermaritzburg, etc. And a colleague of mine, a former captain who had a lot of experience in the 1990s in the so-called township wars, he was nominated. He was actually elected as the sort of leader of this one particular roadblock area, and they forged a relationship with a squatter camp across the road from Cornubia, because that squatter camp was being cast into a bad light by virtue of the fact that people thought that those people were the thieves, and they said, no, we are not the thieves, we are not the looting. They came onto the side of let's call it law and order, which leads us logically now into this new liberated debate that I think we're going to see going forward. I mentioned earlier on in that piece of mine that went viral, I spoke about this as being an inflection point, almost a liberating moment, where a new set of dynamics are going to emerge. And the one dynamic now is the fact that the vacuum has been filled by organized people, and they've organized spontaneously or not, but they've organized, and they're not going to just relinquish that authority, that control, just because the mayor says, you can no longer man a roadblock. So you're going to make me do this? How are you going to make me move? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, it's not going to happen like that. But the second thing is, you're now going to start seeing the strangest of bedfellows come together. So who would have ever thought that the taxi industry would start coming out on the side of law and order? Who would have thought that, okay? But I think the new debate going forward is going to be the de-racialized debate of really what it is. We are South Africans, pink, white, yellow, green, or whatever you are, okay? We are South Africans. We are the bitter einders. We've stayed to the end. We are going to make this country of ours work. It's our country. Don't waste my time by saying I'm not an African. I'm a 12th generation African. I'm as much an African. When the Zulu nation was only born in 1818, April of 1818, I can trace my heritage back to the 1500s and the 1600s in South Africa. So please, that's a sterile conversation. Let's not go down that route. This invigorated South African society is now going to go forward. And they're not going to take nonsense from politicians anymore. Though the bloodsuckers have sucked as much blood as we are willing to give. It's no longer a willing donor, a sort of a blood-sucking relationship that we have anymore. Okay, there's a backlash now. An elephant can only carry so many ticks before the elephant becomes emaciated, and then with its tail, it just knocks those ticks off its backside, because that's where the ticks always hang out. Okay, so we are now in a tick-free, parasite-free environment. The hyenas and the vultures can fight amongst each other. Good luck to them. The hyenas and vultures always get the last little scraps. Okay, we're going to create something new and something better. And just to go back to this R1 trillion we're going to raise. We're going to raise that R1 trillion from private capital. Not 1 cent is going to get stolen, because we're working right now with Treasury and the Presidency. I'm a founding member of a thing called the SA Business Water Chamber, and the Water Chamber has been working now on bringing together all the people in the business of water supply, or the whole value chain of water, and we are creating what are known as special purpose vehicles, SPVs, which are ring-fenced financial entities where the capital coming in is controlled by within that entity. It can't get bled out. It can't get stolen by other people. But we also create the skills and the capacity. In other words, we become a little area of a little bubble of excellence, in this otherwise festering.
I'm delighted. Yes. I just can't believe you didn't take the opportunity to call it the South African Business not instead of chamber of water or water chamber, water closet is what it should have been called. It makes such sense.
There's a lot of hope there. There's a lot of hope. There really is a lot of hope there.
No, there is. All right, closing comments. We've got just a couple of seconds left. Pums, what do you want to say?
Well, I don't even think we need a closing comment. All we gotta say is whatever he said, y'all. I'm so happy to have somebody say all the things.
Thank you,
South Africans can't do this. We're better than that.
Kanthan, you got in a couple of perlers today, but I'm sure that we'll see you again in the not too distant future. Thank you very much for being on the Burning Platform again, Kanthan Pillay. And Dr. Anthony Turton, thank you. Pumi Mashiho, we will see you next week on the Burning Platform at the same time, same place. Make sure you put it in your diary and do not miss the opportunity to hear from really, really interesting and really smart people as we have today. Thanks, everybody. We will see you tomorrow on cliffcentral.com for another Gareth Cliff Show starting at 6.